Speak Xiandapos, 24. Hiandapos, 39. Theandapos, sitting in a dim restaurant booth, candle flickering between them, and Xiandapos, laughing at something he said, but her eyes flick to her phone, just for a second, just to check the time. He notices, he always notices. And underneath the laughter, a quiet thought moves through him like smoke. And quote, am I giving her a life, or am I just borrowing her youth for a while? And quote, Xiandapos, thinking something too. And quote, why do I feel like I have to prove Iandapos mature enough to be here? And quote, wait, Hirandapos is the part almost nobody says out loud about age gap relationships. Itandapos, not the age that breaks them. Itandapos, the two different nervous systems, shaped by two different decades, quietly negotiating who gets to feel safe. Yuandapos, not shallow for wanting someone more established you, and a poseri not a fool for falling for someone younger. Every couple with a gap between their birth years has stood exactly where Yuandapos standing, wondering if the calendar knows something they donandapos. By the end of this, Yuandapos will know exactly which patterns quietly sabotage age gap relationships from the inside, and more importantly, why the people living inside them almost never see it happening. Latandapos, get into it. Most couples believe an age gap relationship survives or fails based on the number itself, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like Thorandapos, a magic ceiling where love stops working. But the real truth is, the number was never the danger. The danger is what the number quietly represents to each nervous system in the room. Your partner Randapos, body dosnandapos, calculate age in years. It calculates it in power, in pace, in who gets to feel more certain. When one partner has already built a career, a home, a sense of self, and the other is still becoming, the relationship is nandapos, unequal because anyone did anything wrong. Itandapos, unequal because one person andapos' nervous system has already found solid ground, and the otherandapos is still searching for it. This is why the fights in age gap relationships rarely sound like the andapos, about age. They sound like the andapos, about freedom, or money, or where to spend a holiday. But underneath, one partner is asking, without words, and quote, will you wait for me to catch up to who Iandapos am becoming? And quote, and the other is asking just as silently, and quote, will you still want me once you get there? And quote, and once you see this pattern, Iandapos will start noticing it everywhere in the relationship. Hirandapos, where it shows up first. Hirandapos is the part no one talks about, the invisible clock. Most couples in age gap relationships think the tension is about the present moment. A fun night out, a shared joke, a good morning text. But Hirandapos, what nobody explains. One partner is quietly living inside a countdown the other dosnandapos even feel yet. Career windows, fertility timelines, aging parents. A body the tandapos already thinking about the next decade, while the other is still figuring out the next weekend. Picture this. Xiandapos as scrolling apartment listings on her phone, genuinely excited, turning the screen toward him mid-sentence. He nods, says the right words, and quote, yeah, that onandapos, nice and quote, but his eyes have already drifted somewhere far away, doing math she can andapos see. Now picture the other version. She turns the screen toward him, and instead of nodding blankly, he sets his own phone face down on the table, leans in and says, and quote, tell me what you andapos, repicturing for us in 5 years. I actually want to know. And quote. Something in her quietly registers, and quote, Hiandapos, not just here for tonight, Hiandapos, willing to stand inside my timeline with me. End quote. And when you do that, the invisible clock stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a shared conversation instead of a private fear. The tandapos, the first crack in the wall. But the randapos is a second one waiting right behind it. This is where it gets really interesting. The authority imbalance. Nobody names. Most couples with an age gap fall into an unspoken hierarchy without ever agreeing to it. The older partner becomes the guide. Speak. The younger partner becomes the student. It feels natural at first, even flattering. But Hirandapos, what changes everything? A relationship built on guide and student eventually stops being a relationship between equals, and both people feel it long before either says it out loud. Picture the disconnecting version. He corrects the way she budgets, calmly, kindly, That andapos, not really how adults handle money. She nods, smiles, says nothing. But something in her closes just slightly, like a door easing shut. Now the connecting version. She says, I actually see it differently, and instead of correcting her, he tilts his head, genuinely curious, and says, okay, walk me through it. Her brain quietly registers, he just treated me like an equal, not a project. Not louder disagreements, not more explaining, not him softening his tone while still secretly believing he knows better, but two people who actually see each other as peers, standing on the same level, even with different amounts of years behind them. That andapos, when the relationship stops feeling like mentorship wearing a couple andapos, clothing, here andapos, is the part most couples never figure out. The friend group fracture. Most people assume the hardest part of an age gap relationship is convincing the two partners it can work. But here andapos, what nobody explains. Itandapos, rarely the partners who struggle first. Itandapos, everyone standing around them. Her friends raise an eyebrow at brunch, his friends go quiet when he brings her to dinner, and slowly, without either partner choosing it, they start spending less time in rooms where people ask questions with their eyebrows instead of their mouths. Emotional distance in a relationship like this is andapos, like a wall going up overnight. Itandapos, like scar tissue, forming slowly over 100 small moments of feeling unseen by the people who were supposed to be in their corner. Picture her sitting quietly while her friends talk about onqua, guys her own age enqua, like the conversation does andapos, include him. Now picture the version where he andapos is there, and instead of staying silent while they talk around her relationship, she says, plainly, I love him. I need you to be curious instead of worried. Read that again, and when she says that out loud, something shifts, not because the friends instantly agree, but because she just chose him over their silent approval, out loud, in the room. That andapos, the moment a relationship stops surviving on secrecy and starts being real to everyone, not just the two people inside it. This is the one most couples never see coming, the sexual and emotional maturity mismatch. Most people assume maturity is about age. It is itandapos, about what someone has already survived. But here andapos is the deeper truth. A 25-year-old huandapos already navigated grief, betrayal, or hard financial years can be more emotionally regulated than a 40-year-old huandapos never had to sit in real discomfort. Age gap relationships fall apart not because of years, but because one partner assumes maturity comes automatically with age, and the other assumes immaturity is automatic without it. Picture the disconnecting scene. He says, dismissively, you andapos, I'll understand when you andapos, older, during an argument that has nothing to do with age at all. Her jaw tightens. She says nothing else for the rest of the night. Now picture the connecting version. Instead of dismissing her, he catches himself mid-sentence and says, wait. That wasn't andapos fair. Tell me what you actually mean. Something in him quietly shifts too. She does andapos need me to have all the answers. She needs me to actually listen. The tandapos, when the relationship stops being about who has lived longer, and starts being about who andapos, willing to show up fully, right now, in this exact conversation. Here andapos, where it gets heavier, the future-proofing fear. Most couples avoid this conversation entirely because naming it feels like admitting the relationship might not survive it. Speak. What happens when he's 70 and she's 55? What happens if illness comes early for one of them and the other still has decades of life left to live? But here's what nobody explains. Avoiding that fear doesn't protect the relationship. It just makes the fear grow in the dark, unspoken, showing up sideways as jealousy, control, or sudden distance neither partner can explain. Picture the version where the fear stays buried. She brings up the future gently, and he changes the subject, laughing it off. Let's not think about that yet. She goes quiet, and something in her starts building a wall brick by brick. Now picture the other version. He takes a breath, holds her hand and says, I think about that too. I don't have an answer, but I don't want to pretend it isn't real just to make tonight easier. Something in her softens completely. He's not hiding from the hard parts. He's willing to stand in them with me. That's the difference between a relationship that quietly erodes under an unspoken fear and one that grows roots strong enough to hold it. And this is the last one, the one that decides everything, whose life the relationship is actually built around. Most age gap couples, without realizing it, build the relationship around the older partner's life, their established home, their existing friend group, their finished chapter of figuring it out. But here's the truth underneath it. A relationship only survives long-term when it's being built by two people, not hosted by one and visited by the other. Picture the disconnecting version. Every decision defaults to what he's already used to. Where they live, how they spend weekends, which friends they see. She slowly becomes a guest in a life that was already finished before she arrived. Now picture the connecting version. He looks around the home they share and says, "This doesn't feel like your life and my visits anymore. I want this to feel like ours, even if that means changing things I thought were already settled." Not more compromise on her side. Not more patience while she waits to be folded in. But two people actively building something new, together, instead of one person opening the door to a life that was already built. And when that happens, the relationship stops feeling like an age gap being managed, and starts feeling like two people, at exactly the stage they're each in, choosing each other on purpose. Back to that restaurant booth. The candle's burned lower now, she's not checking her phone anymore. He's not doing silent math about the years between them. They're just two people leaning in, actually listening. This was never a checklist for making an age gap work. It's an invitation to stop treating the years between you like a problem to manage and start treating each other like two whole people building something neither of you could have built alone. The years between you were never the real gap. The real gap is whatever goes unsaid. If you want to know exactly how to have that first hard conversation about the future without either of you shutting down, that's the video I made right after this one. Whatever chapter you're each in, you get to choose to write the next one together, starting now.